Welcome to Mission 10 of Copilot Studio Agent Academy. Today we're diving into a powerful concept, autonomous agents, and how you can unlock event-driven behavior using triggers in Copilot Studio. My name is Scott Durow and I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft. In this lab, we're going to learn how to make your Copilot agent proactive by enabling them to respond to system events automatically without a user needing to type anything. So let's get started. The big question is, what's an autonomous agent? Well, it's like an agent that responds to your questions, except for it can independently begin work based on triggers. That means it can begin a long-running process, it can reason dynamically over its own abilities, and it does all this while still following human-defined guardrails. In Copilot Studio, we make this possible by adding event triggers to our agent. This then acts as the agent's signal to take action. Event triggers are actions that allow your agent to respond when something specific happens, without the user doing anything. A file is created in SharePoint or OneDrive, a record is created in Dataverse, a task is completed in Planner, a form response is submitted, a team message is added, or maybe it's just based on a recurring schedule like a daily reminder. In the Mission 10 lab, we're going to build an autonomous agent that does the following. Firstly, a new IT support ticket is created in SharePoint, and this acts as the trigger to the agent. The trigger then sends a payload of data to the agent along with some specific instructions. The agent then uses that data and the agent instructions to decide what to do using its topics, tools, and knowledge. The agent then sends an AI-generated email acknowledging that the ticket has been created, along with any initial information that it can provide. It's important to understand the difference between event triggers and topic triggers that we've covered already. Topic triggers are activated by what the user types. These are great for natural conversations, whereas event triggers are fired by external events or timer schedules, and they don't require user input. In this lab, you'll get hands-on with the full event trigger flow. So you're going to learn how to create a new event trigger in Copilot Studio, define a custom payload with instructions for the agent, configure the agent's response, and test everything to make sure that your agent is reacting in the way you expect it to. Before jumping into this lab, it's important that you make sure you've got a few things ready. Firstly, make sure you've already completed the earlier missions so that your agent is already built. Make sure you have access to the SharePoint site created previously because we're going to be creating IT support tickets there. And finally, make sure you have access to a mailbox that Copilot Studio can connect to. So the first thing we need to do is head over to SharePoint and check that we have the tickets list inside the Contoso IT site, the one that you created in a previous lab. We also need to ensure that orchestration is set to generative mode. Now go to the Add a Trigger section in the Overview tab and select Add. I'm going to search for when an item is created in SharePoint and select it to add a trigger for this agent. Click Next, and now I can define the name of my trigger. I'll call it New Support Ticket Created in SharePoint. Next, check the connections, then select the site address and the list name, which is tickets in this case. Now I'm going to provide a custom payload instruction. Here's what I'm entering. This is a new support ticket created in SharePoint. Use the Acknowledge SharePoint ticket tool to generate the email body automatically and respond. Important, do not wait for any user input, work completely autonomously. We'll be creating the Acknowledge SharePoint ticket tool later on. I'll select Create Trigger. It takes a little while, but what it's doing now is creating a Power Automate flow with that SharePoint trigger and associating it to my agent. If I go back to the Triggers section, you can now see that the new trigger listed, New Support Ticket Created in SharePoint. And if I select Edit in Power Automate, I can now see the flow. The trigger is at the top when an item is created, and then the last step is send a prompt to the specified Copilot for processing. This will automatically send a message to the agent associated with this trigger. Now, instead of sending the full body of the SharePoint item, I'm going to use an expression to format just the key fields, each on a separate line. So I'll include the email address and name of the person who submits the ticket, the title, the description, the priority, and finally the SharePoint ticket ID in case we need to look it up later. I'll save that. Then if we head back over to Copilot Studio, go to Tools, I need to define a tool that can give the agent the ability to acknowledge the ticket by email. I'm going to search for the Send an Email connector, which uses Office 365 Outlook to send the message. Select it, and now I can add and configure it in the agent. I'll name the tool Acknowledge SharePoint Ticket, and you'll notice that that's the exact name that I referred to earlier in the payload instructions. I'll also give it a short description so the agent knows exactly what it's for. Now, for each of the inputs, I'll add some extra information to help guide the agent. For the To field, I'll specify that it should be populated with the email address of the person submitting the ticket. This will be in the payload. And I'll mark it as an email type so the agent knows what it's looking for. Next, in the body, I'll give instructions to acknowledge that the ticket was received and let the user know we aim to respond within 3 working days. I'm not giving it any specific template, I'm asking the agent to author the email based on the information from the payload. Now, let's go back to the overview, scroll down to triggers, and we're ready to test. Click Test Trigger, and the dialog will now wait for the event to be fired. So let's head over to SharePoint and create a new ticket. I'll use the title Unable to connect to VPN and add a description, Unable to connect to the corporate Wi-Fi network after a recent update. I'll set the priority to normal and then hit save. This will now trigger the Power Automate flow, which sends the trigger to the agent. We may need to refresh, but once it's picked up, I can select the trigger and click Start Testing. That begins a session that shows the full activity map of what the agent is doing in response to the trigger. You'll see the trigger was detected, all the payload data is there, including the instructions, and the agent follows these instructions using the Acknowledge SharePoint Ticket tool. You can see that the To field is populated with the submitter's email address, the body has been authored by the agent and includes a summary of the ticket, and it clearly states that we aim to respond within 3 working days. And just like that, we've created a fully autonomous agent that will start working on our behalf when we publish it. And that wraps up Mission 10 of the Copilot Studio Agent Academy. Event triggers are one of the most powerful tools in Copilot Studio. They allow your agents to act like real collaborators. So keep experimenting, keep building, and as always, keep learning. We'll see you in the next mission of the Agent Academy.